ordinary motorcycle uses a type of clutch called a friction clutch. The friction clutch uses the friction force between the drive plate on the engine side and the driven plate on the transmission side to convey or cut off the power from the engine. There are two types of friction clutch. The dry type uses air to cool the friction heat produced when power is conveyed, and the wet type clutch, which uses oil for cooling. Each type can either be a single plate type, which has only one friction plate, or a multi-plate type, which has a number of friction plates. Most motorcycles use the wet type multi-plate clutch. In this clutch, drive plates and driven plates are stacked alternately and are pushed by springs to convey power. All of the parts in this type of clutch are lubricated by oil. In order to understand the basic operation of this clutch, let's look at how the various components are connected. First of all, the clutch housing is mounted on the counter shaft, but it is not connected to the counter shaft, allowing the shaft to rotate freely. The clutch sleeve hub is coupled to the counter shaft by means of a spline, so it rotates together with the counter shaft. The drive plates and driven plates are stacked alternately, but the drive plates are connected to the clutch housing side, and the driven plates are connected to the clutch sleeve hub side. This pressure plate is pushed against the drive plates and driven plates by means of spring force. Because the drive plates and driven plates are being pressed against by the springs, they rotate along with the clutch housing when it rotates, thus turning the counter shaft. In this way, the power from the engine is transmitted from the crankshaft to the clutch housing, and the friction force generated by the drive plates and driven plates is conveyed from the clutch sleeve hub to the transmission. There are two methods used to move the pressure plates. In one, the rack and pinion system, a pinion installed on the clutch release shaft pulls on the clutch release rack, forcing the spring to compress. In the other, the push rod type, the plate is pressed from the opposite direction by a push rod to compress the spring. When the spring is compressed, a gap is created between the clutch drive plates and the driven plates, so that no power is conveyed to the clutch sleeve hub, even when the clutch housing rotates. Therefore, no power is transmitted to the counter shaft either. The capacity of the clutch is proportional to the number of clutch plates and the size of the surface area where friction is generated, as well as to the strength of the clutch spring. The clutch is provided with damper springs and damper rubbers, which absorb the impact caused by changes in torque from the crankshaft and drive wheels, and allow the force to be transmitted smoothly.